The blizzard had turned the New Mexico territory into a white hell, and Harrison Hayes was beginning to think he would not make it back to his ranch alive when he saw the dark shape half buried in the snowdrift ahead. At first, he thought it might be a fallen deer or perhaps a young calf that had wandered too far from its herd. But as his horse trudged closer through the knee-deep snow, Harrison realized with a jolt that the shape was human. He dismounted quickly, his boots sinking into the white powder, and rushed to the figure. A woman lay there, her lips tinged blue, her dark hair matted with ice and snow. She wore traditional Apache clothing, now soaked through and frozen stiff against her skin. Harrison dropped to his knees beside her, his heart hammering. She could not have been out here long, or she would already be dead. He pressed his fingers to her neck, searching for a pulse, and felt the faint flutter of life still beating beneath her cold skin. Her eyes opened then, just barely, dark as midnight and clouded with the fog of hypothermia. Her lips moved, and he leaned closer to hear the whisper that escaped them. "Warm me." Those two words, spoken with such desperate need, cut straight through Harrison's chest. He did not hesitate. He stripped off his heavy coat and wrapped it around her, then lifted her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, a fragile bundle of frozen limbs and chattering teeth. His horse whinnied nervously as he approached, but the animal held steady as Harrison hoisted the woman onto the saddle before climbing up behind her. He held her against his chest, trying to share what body heat he could as he urged his horse forward through the storm. The ranch was still 3 miles away, and those 3 miles felt like 30. The wind howled around them, driving snow into Harrison's face and making it nearly impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. He kept his arms tight around the woman, feeling her shiver against him, and prayed to whatever God might be listening that he could get her to warmth in time. When the dark outline of his ranch house finally appeared through the white curtain of snow, Harrison nearly wept with relief. He guided his horse to the barn first, knowing the animal needed shelter as much as they did, then carried the woman inside the house. The fire in the hearth had burned low, but embers still glowed. He laid her on the floor near the fireplace and quickly added wood, stoking the flames until they roared back to life. Her clothing was frozen solid in places. Harrison knew he needed to get her out of the wet garments, but propriety warred with practicality in his mind. Propriety lost. This woman would die if he did not act quickly. He worked as respectfully as he could, removing her frozen dress and leggings, trying not to look more than necessary, and wrapped her in every blanket he owned. He heated water on the stove and used cloths to warm her extremities gradually, knowing that warming her too quickly could be just as dangerous as leaving her cold. For hours, he worked over her, changing out the warm cloths, adding more wood to the fire, checking her breathing and her pulse. Slowly, color began to return to her face. Her shivering grew stronger, which he knew was a good sign, her body fighting to generate heat. As dawn light began to filter through the windows, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold, her eyes opened again. This time they were clear and focused. She looked up at him with an expression he could not quite read, a mixture of wariness and something that might have been gratitude. "You are safe," Harrison said, his voice hoarse from exhaustion. "You are in my home. I found you in the snow." She studied him for a long moment before speaking. When she did, her English was accented but clear. "You saved my life. I could not leave you there. Many would have." Harrison had no response to that because he knew she was right. The year was 1884, and the relationship between white settlers and Apache people in the New Mexico territory was fraught with tension and violence. Many men he knew would have ridden past, or worse. He had never understood that kind of hatred. People were people, as far as he was concerned. "What is your name?" he asked. "Citlali," she said. "It means star in my mother's language." "Citlali," he repeated, liking the way it felt in his mouth. "I am Harrison Hayes. Most people call me Harrison." "Harrison," she said, and he liked the way she said it too, with the slight roll to the R that her accent gave it. Over the next few days, as the blizzard continued to rage outside, Harrison took care of Citlali. He gave her his bed and slept on the floor near the fire. He made her soup and brought her water and tried to give her privacy while still checking on her regularly to make sure she was recovering. Her feet had suffered some frostbite, and she could not walk without pain, so she remained in bed most of the time. Harrison found himself drawn to her in ways he had not expected. When he sat beside the bed to bring her meals, they talked. She told him about her people, about growing up in the mountains to the north, about the traditions and stories that had been passed down through generations. He told her about his life, about growing up in Texas and coming to New Mexico to start his own ranch 5 years ago, about the lonely existence of a man living by himself on the frontier. "Why do you have no wife?" Citlali asked one evening as Harrison sat in the chair beside the bed, whittling a piece of wood while she rested. The question caught him off guard. "I suppose I never found the right woman, and out here, there are not many to choose from. Most of the women in the nearest town are already spoken for." "You are not an ugly man," she said, and he looked up to find her watching him with an expression that might have been amusement. "You are kind. These are good qualities." Harrison felt his face grow warm. "You are very direct." Life is short. There is no time to dance around truth. He could not argue with that. "What about you? Do you have a husband waiting for you?" Citlali's expression darkened. "I was running from a husband. That is why I was in the snow." Harrison set down his whittling, giving her his full attention. "You were running away," she nodded slowly. "My father arranged a marriage to a man from another band, a man who is cruel and cares nothing for me. I refused, but my father said I had no choice. So I ran." Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "But I became lost in the storm. I thought I would die out there. Perhaps that would have been better." "Do not say that," Harrison said, surprised by the vehemence in his own voice. "Your life has value. You have value." Citlali looked at him with those dark, penetrating eyes. "You do not even know me." "I know enough." Something shifted between them in that moment, something intangible but powerful. Harrison felt it like a physical presence in the room, drawing him toward her. He stood abruptly, suddenly needing distance. "I should check on the horses," he said, though he had checked on them only an hour before. If Citlali noticed his discomfort, she said nothing, simply watched him leave with an unreadable expression on her face. The blizzard finally broke on the 5th day. Harrison woke to silence, the absence of howling wind strange after days of constant noise. He looked out the window to see the sun rising over a landscape transformed, everything buried under feet of pristine white snow. Citlali was healing well. The frostbite on her feet was not as bad as he had initially feared, and she could now walk around the cabin, though she still limped. Harrison found himself watching her more than he should, noticing the grace in her movements despite her injury. The way the firelight played across her features in the evening, the sound of her voice when she spoke. He was falling for her. The realization hit him one morning as he watched her prepare breakfast, insisting that she could help now that she was feeling better. She moved around his kitchen with growing confidence, and Harrison found himself imagining what it might be like if this were not temporary, if she stayed, if this became their life together. But she would not stay. She had a life to return to, people who would be worried about her. And even if she wanted to stay, the world outside his ranch would never accept them. A white man and an Apache woman together would face hostility from both sides. "You are thinking too loud," Citlali said, breaking into his thoughts. She set a plate of eggs and bread in front of him. I can hear it from here. Harrison managed a smile. Just thinking about what needs to be done now that the storm has passed. I will need to dig out paths to the barn and check on the cattle. You are a terrible liar, she said, but she did not push. They ate in companionable silence. After breakfast, Harrison bundled up and went out to assess the damage from the storm. The snow was deeper than he had expected, coming up past his knees in places. It took him most of the morning just to clear a path to the barn. His horses were fine, and when he managed to trudge out to check on his small herd of cattle, he found that most had survived by clustering together in a sheltered ravine. When he returned to the house, cold and exhausted, Citlali had hot coffee waiting for him. She helped him out of his coat and pushed him into a chair by the fire. The domesticity of it all made Harrison's chest ache with longing. "Your feet," he said, noticing her bare limping. "You should not be walking so much. They are healing. Movement helps." She poured coffee into 2 tin cups and handed him one. "Harrison, I need to tell you something." The seriousness in her tone made him sit up straighter. "What is it?" "I cannot go back to my people. Not yet, maybe not ever. If I return, my father will force me to marry the man I ran from. And now that I have been gone so long alone." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "There will be questions, assumptions. My reputation will be ruined." "So what will you do?" Citlali met his eyes. "I was hoping I might stay here. For a while I can work. I can cook and clean and help with the ranch. I will earn my keep." Harrison's heart leaped, but he forced himself to think practically. "Citlali, people will talk. If anyone finds out you are here, an Apache woman living with a white man alone. I know the dangers. But I have nowhere else to go, and I—" She looked down at her coffee cup. "I feel safe here, with you." Those last 3 words destroyed any resistance Harrison might have mustered. "You can stay as long as you need to, as long as you want to." The smile she gave him was like the sun coming out after the storm. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm that felt natural and right. Harrison had never shared his life with anyone before, and he discovered that he liked it. He liked coming in from morning chores to find Citlali making breakfast. He liked the sound of her voice as she sang traditional songs while doing tasks around the house. He liked the evenings they spent by the fire, talking or sitting in comfortable silence. But he was also acutely aware of the growing tension between them, the unspoken feelings that seemed to fill every room they occupied together. He caught her watching him sometimes with an expression that made his pulse quicken. He knew she must catch him looking at her the same way. One evening, about 3 weeks after he had found her in the snow, they sat by the fire after supper. Citlali was mending one of his shirts, and Harrison was reading a newspaper that was already 2 months old, brought by the supply wagon on its last trip before the snows came. "Harrison," Citlali said suddenly, setting down the mending. "Why did you really let me stay?" He looked up from the newspaper. "I told you, you needed help. Many people need help. You could have taken me to the nearest town, left me with a church or a charitable family. Instead, you brought me to your home and let me stay even though you knew it could cause problems for you." She leaned forward, her dark eyes intense. "Why?" Harrison set the newspaper aside. His mouth felt dry. "I think you know why. I want to hear you say it." He stood up, suddenly restless, and paced to the window. Outside, the snow-covered landscape glowed silver under a full moon. "From the moment you opened your eyes and looked at me, I felt something I had never felt before. And these past weeks, getting to know you, sharing my life with you, it has only grown stronger. I know it is impossible. I know the world will never accept us, but I cannot help how I feel." He heard her stand, heard her footsteps crossing the room toward him. When she spoke, her voice was just behind him. Why is it impossible, Citlali? He turned to face her. She stood close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her dark eyes. Your people and mine, we have been at war. The prejudices run deep on both sides. If we were together, truly together, we would face hatred and danger every day. I know this, she said simply. I have thought of nothing else these past weeks. But Harrison, I have also thought about how I feel when I am with you, how safe I feel, how happy. I have thought about how you look at me like I am precious, like I matter. No one has ever looked at me that way before. She reached up and placed her palm against his chest, over his heart. I have thought about this, how it beats faster when I am near you. Mine does the same thing. Harrison covered her hand with his own. If we do this, there is no going back. We will be choosing a difficult path. I ran into a blizzard to escape a life I did not want. I almost died. But you found me and you saved me, and now I am here with you. Perhaps that means something. Perhaps we are meant to choose this difficult path together. Harrison had spent his entire life being cautious and practical, thinking through every decision carefully. But in that moment, with Citlali looking up at him with her heart in her eyes, he decided to stop thinking and simply feel. He cupped her face in his hands, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to, but she only smiled. When he finally kissed her, it felt like coming home. Winter slowly gave way to spring. The snow melted, revealing brown earth and the first green shoots of new growth. Harrison's ranch came back to life with the changing season, and Citlali was there for all of it. She learned to help him with the horses and cattle, and he was amazed at her natural skill with animals. She had a way of calming even the most skittish horse with her voice and gentle hands. They had become lovers in every sense of the word, and Harrison had never been happier. But happiness, he knew, was a fragile thing, and reality had a way of intruding. It happened on a warm day in early April. Harrison had ridden into the nearest town, a small settlement called Golden about 15 miles from his ranch, to buy supplies. Citlali had wanted to come with him, but he had convinced her to stay behind, worried about how people might react to seeing her. He was loading sacks of flour and beans onto his wagon when he heard a familiar voice behind him. Harrison Hayes, as I live and breathe. Been a while since we have seen you in town. Harrison turned to find Sheriff Tom Dalton standing there, a man he had known casually for several years. The sheriff was a decent enough fellow, though Harrison had never entirely trusted his views on Apache people. "Sheriff," Harrison said with a nod. "Been busy at the ranch. Winter was hard." "That it was," Dalton agreed. He leaned against the wagon, his posture casual but his eyes sharp. "Say, strange thing happened a few weeks back. Old Pedro Martinez was out checking his trap lines after that big blizzard in February, and he swore he saw smoke coming from your chimney. Said it looked like there were 2 people moving around inside your house." Harrison kept his expression neutral, though his heart had started to pound. Pedro must have been seeing things, just me out there, same as always. Dalton nodded slowly. "That is what I figured. But then Betty Carson at the general store mentioned you have been buying a lot more food than usual for a man living alone. And softer goods too, fabric and such. A man is allowed to eat well and keep a tidy house," Harrison said, tension creeping into his voice. "Course he is," Dalton said easily. "I am just making conversation." He paused, then added, "You know there has been trouble with Apache raiders to the north. Cattle stolen, a homestead burned. People are nervous. And when people get nervous, they start seeing threats everywhere, even where there might not be any." Harrison understood the warning beneath the words. "I appreciate you letting me know, Sheriff, but I can assure you there is no threat coming from my ranch." "I believe you, Harrison. You have always been a good man, an honest man. I would hate to see you get caught up in something that could bring trouble down on your head." Dalton tipped his hat. "You take care now." Harrison finished loading his wagon quickly and headed back to the ranch, his mind racing. The ride had never seemed longer. When he finally arrived home and found Citlali in the garden she had started planting, his relief was palpable. She took one look at his face and knew something was wrong. What happened? Inside the house, Harrison told her about his conversation with the sheriff. Citlali listened quietly, her expression growing troubled. "I am putting you in danger," she said when he finished. "I should leave." "No." The word came out more forcefully than he intended. "You are not leaving. This is your home now. You belong here." "Harrison, be reasonable. If people know I am here, they could come after you. They could accuse you of harboring a fugitive or worse. They could hurt you because of me." He crossed to where she sat and knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. "Citlali, listen to me. I am not going to live my life in fear of what other people think or what they might do. You are the best thing that has ever happened to me. These past months with you have been the happiest of my entire life. I am not giving that up. But what are we going to do?" Harrison had been thinking about that the entire ride home. "We are going to make this right. We are going to make it official. I want you to marry me, Citlali. I want you to be my wife in the eyes of God and the law. Then no one can say anything about you being here." Citlali's eyes widened. "You would do that? You would marry me despite everything?" "I would marry you because of everything. Because you are brave and kind and strong. Because you make me laugh. Because when I think about my future, all I see is you." He squeezed her hands. "That is if you will have me. I know I am not offering you an easy life." Tears spilled down Citlali's cheeks, but she was smiling. "Yes, Harrison. Yes, I will marry you." Getting married proved more complicated than Harrison had anticipated. The first preacher he approached in Golden took one look at Citlali and refused, quoting scripture about being unequally yoked. The second preacher was more polite but no more helpful, suggesting that perhaps they should think carefully about the challenges they would face. It was Citlali who suggested they try the mission church in Santa Fe. "There is a priest there, Father Miguel, who is known for helping Apache people. My cousin told me about him once. Perhaps he would marry us." The journey to Santa Fe took 3 days. They camped under the stars at night, and Harrison found those nights beautiful despite the circumstances. Lying beside Citlali, watching the vast expanse of stars overhead, he felt a peace he had never known. Father Miguel turned out to be an elderly priest with kind eyes and a gentle manner. He listened to their story without interruption, then sat back in his chair and studied them both for a long moment. "You understand what you are choosing?" he asked. "The life you will face will not be easy. Both your communities may reject you. You will be outsiders everywhere you go." "We understand," Harrison said, reaching for Citlali's hand. "But we would rather face those challenges together than be apart." Father Miguel smiled. "Then who am I to stand in the way of love? God brings people together in mysterious ways. I will marry you." They were wed the next day in a simple ceremony in the small mission church. There were no guests, no flowers, no celebration. Just Harrison and Citlali standing before Father Miguel, speaking their vows with voices that shook with emotion. When the priest pronounced them man and wife and told Harrison he could kiss his bride, Harrison felt like the luckiest man alive. The ride back to the ranch was different than the journey to Santa Fe. They were husband and wife now, and that changed everything. Harrison found himself constantly reaching for Citlali's hand, and she would smile at him with a happiness that made his heart ache. When they arrived home, Harrison insisted on carrying her over the threshold, making her laugh. Inside, everything looked the same, but it all felt different. This was not just his house anymore. It was their home. The first real test of their marriage came a few weeks later when a group of ranchers from the area, including Sheriff Dalton, rode up to Harrison's property. Citlali saw them coming and rushed to tell Harrison, fear in her eyes. "It will be all right," Harrison told her, though his own heart was pounding. "Stay inside. Let me handle this." He walked out to meet the men, counting 7 riders in all. Dalton was in front and his expression was serious. "Harrison," the sheriff said with a nod, "we need to talk." "Then talk." Dalton glanced back at the other men, then returned his attention to Harrison. "Word has gotten around that you have an Apache woman living here. People are concerned. Her name is Citlali and she is my wife. We were married by Father Miguel in Santa Fe. It is all legal and proper." Harrison stood his ground, his jaw set. "She is not going anywhere." The revelation caused a stir among the riders. One of them, a rancher named Bill Thompson, whom Harrison had never particularly liked, spoke up. "You married a savage. Have you lost your mind?" "I married a woman I love," Harrison said evenly, "and I would thank you to watch your tongue when speaking about my wife." "This is an outrage," Thompson blustered. "You are harboring one of them right here, right under our noses. How do we know she is not passing information to raiders? How do we know this whole thing is not some kind of trap?" Harrison took a step forward, his hands clenched into fists. "You are on my land, accusing my wife of treachery with no evidence. I suggest you leave before I make you leave." "Harrison," Sheriff Dalton said, raising a hand. "Nobody wants trouble, but you have to understand how this looks." "I understand perfectly well how it looks. It looks like a man fell in love and married the woman he loves. If that is a crime, then arrest me." Before anyone could respond, the door to the house opened and Citlali stepped out. Harrison wanted to tell her to go back inside, but he knew she would not. She walked to stand beside him, her head held high. "My name is Citlali Hayes," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I am Harrison's wife. I understand that you do not trust me because of my people, just as my people would not trust me now because I married a white man. But I am not your enemy. I want only to live in peace with my husband." She looked at each man in turn, meeting their eyes without flinching. "I know what some of you are thinking. You are wondering if I am a spy or if I am planning to hurt you. I am not. I left my own people to be with Harrison. I gave up everything I knew, everyone I loved, to be here. This is my home now. This is my life. And I will defend it as fiercely as any of you would defend yours." There was a long moment of silence. Then, surprisingly, Dalton tipped his hat to her. "Mrs. Hayes, I appreciate your honesty." He looked at Harrison. "I will spread the word that things are as you say. But Harrison, you have to understand that trust takes time to build. Keep your nose clean and eventually people will accept this." "That is all I ask," Harrison said. The riders left, though Thompson looked back with an expression that promised this was not over. Harrison and Citlali stood together, watching them go until they disappeared from sight. "You should not have come out," Harrison said, turning to her. "I am your wife," Citlali replied. "Where you stand, I stand. We are together in this." Harrison pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. "Together," he agreed. The months that followed were not easy, but they were good. Some people in Golden remained hostile, refusing to do business with Harrison or acknowledge Citlali. But others, gradually, began to accept them. The store owner's wife, Betty Carson, surprised everyone by speaking up in their defense when someone made a cruel comment in her presence. A few neighboring ranchers, seeing that Citlali was indeed just a woman trying to build a life with her husband, began to warm up to them. Citlali proved invaluable on the ranch. She had a gift with horses that amazed Harrison, able to gentle even the wildest Mustang with patience and soft words. She taught him Apache techniques for tracking and reading the land that made him a better rancher. And at night, when they lay together in their bed, she filled his life with a love and passion he had never dreamed possible. By the time autumn arrived, painting the New Mexico landscape in golds and reds, Citlali had news that changed everything. She came to find Harrison in the barn one evening, and he knew immediately from her expression that something important had happened. "I am with child," she said simply. Harrison stood frozen for a moment, unable to process the words. Then joy burst through him like sunlight. He swept her into his arms, spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to stop. "A baby," he said wonderingly, setting her down carefully as if she might break. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Citlali asked, though she must have been able to see the answer on his face. "Happy does not even begin to cover it." Harrison kissed her gently. "You have given me so much, Citlali. A home, a purpose, love, and now a child. I do not deserve you. We deserve each other," she corrected. "That is how love works." The pregnancy was not easy. Citlali suffered from sickness in the early months, and Harrison worried constantly. He insisted she rest more, do less around the ranch, though she chafed at his protectiveness. As her belly grew round with their child, Harrison found himself overcome with moments of wonder, placing his hand on her stomach to feel the baby kick, imagining what their son or daughter would look like. Winter came again, almost a full year since Harrison had found Citlali in that snowdrift. One evening, as they sat by the fire much as they had that first winter, Citlali said, "I never thanked you properly." Harrison looked up from the cradle he was building. "Thank me for what?" "For saving my life that day, for bringing me here, for loving me." She smiled, one hand resting on her swollen belly. "For giving me a life worth living." "You saved me too," Harrison said softly. "I did not even realize how lonely I was until you were here. You filled all the empty spaces I did not know existed." Citlali went into labor on a cold February night, snow falling softly outside the windows. Harrison had arranged for a midwife from Golden to come stay with them as her time grew near, a kind woman named Martha who had treated Citlali with respect and warmth. Martha proved her worth that night, guiding Citlali through the long hours of labor with calm competence, while Harrison paced and worried. Dawn was breaking when he finally heard the thin, angry cry of a newborn baby. Martha appeared in the doorway of the bedroom, a smile on her tired face. "You have a son, Mr. Hayes, a healthy boy, and your wife did beautifully." Harrison rushed past her into the bedroom. Citlali lay propped up on pillows, exhausted but radiant, holding a small bundle wrapped in soft blankets. When he approached the bed, she pulled back the blanket to show him their son's face. The baby had his mother's dark hair and tawny skin, but his eyes, when they fluttered open briefly, were the clear blue of his father's. He was perfect, a miracle, a bridge between two worlds. "What should we name him?" Citlali asked softly. Harrison reached out a gentle finger to stroke his son's soft cheek. "I was thinking about my father's name, Henry, but maybe we could give him one of your people's names as well." Citlali's eyes filled with tears. "That would be good. In my language there is a name, Cha. It means snake. It represents wisdom and transformation. Henry Cha Hayes." "Henry Cha Hayes," Harrison repeated, testing how the names sounded together. "It is perfect. He is perfect." The months after Henry's birth were among the happiest of Harrison's life. He had never known he could love someone as fiercely as he loved his son. He would sit for hours just watching the baby sleep, marveling at his tiny fingers and toes. And watching Citlali as a mother made him fall in love with her all over again. She was patient and gentle, singing traditional Apache songs as she rocked Henry to sleep, telling him stories in both English and her own language, but their happiness was shadowed by growing tensions in the territory. Apache raids were increasing as the government continued to push native peoples onto smaller and smaller reservations. The violence bred more violence, and suspicion of all Apache people, even those trying to live peacefully, intensified. Harrison first sensed real trouble when he went into Golden for supplies and found the town buzzing with angry talk. A ranch 10 miles north had been attacked, cattle stolen, and a young ranch hand killed. The ranchers were talking about forming a militia to hunt down the raiders. When Thompson saw Harrison, he made a point of speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear. Mighty convenient how Hayes has not had any trouble from raiders. Makes you wonder if he has some kind of protection, some kind of inside information. Harrison ignored the provocation, collected his supplies, and headed home. But he knew the situation was deteriorating. That night, after Citlali put Henry to bed, he told her what he had heard in town. "They are looking for someone to blame," Citlali said quietly, "and I am an easy target." "I will not let anyone hurt you or Henry," Harrison said fiercely. "I will protect you both with my life if I have to. I know you will. But Harrison, perhaps we should consider leaving, going somewhere where we are not known, where we can start fresh." Harrison had been thinking the same thing, but hearing her say it made it real. "Where would we go?" "Anywhere. California, perhaps. I have heard there are more people there, bigger towns where we might not stand out so much." They talked late into the night, weighing their options. By the time they finally went to bed, they had decided to leave New Mexico. Harrison would sell the ranch and use the money to buy land in California, somewhere they could raise Henry in peace. But before they could act on their decision, violence came to them. It was 3 nights later. Harrison woke to the sound of breaking glass and smelled smoke. He bolted upright, immediately alert, and saw orange light flickering from downstairs. Fire. "Citlali, get Henry," he shouted, already moving. He could hear men's voices outside, shouting, and the thunder of hoofbeats. Citlali grabbed Henry from his cradle, wrapping him in blankets as the baby began to cry. Harrison grabbed his rifle and ran to the window. In the light from the flames now engulfing the front of the house, he could see figures on horseback, some holding torches. "Hayes," a voice shouted. It sounded like Thompson. "Send the Apache woman out. She does not belong here. This is your last warning." Harrison fired a shot over their heads, more to show he was armed than to hit anyone. "Get off my land," he roared. "This is my wife, my family. You have no right." The response was more gunfire, bullets shattering what was left of the windows. Harrison ducked down, his mind racing. The fire was spreading quickly, and they could not stay in the house much longer. But if they went outside, the men might shoot them. "The back door," Citlali said urgently over Henry's wailing. "We can get to the barn, take the horses." It was risky, but it was their only chance. Harrison led the way, keeping low, his rifle ready. They made it out the back door and into the chaos of smoke and darkness. The barn was only 30 yards away, but it felt like miles. They were halfway there when Harrison heard someone shout. "There they are!" More gunfire erupted. Harrison felt something burn across his shoulder but kept moving, urging Citlali forward. They reached the barn, and Harrison quickly saddled 2 horses with shaking hands. "Take Henry and ride," he told Citlali, lifting her onto one horse. "Ride to Santa Fe to Father Miguel. He will help you." "What about you?" Citlali's voice was panicked. "I will be right behind you. Go now." He slapped the horse's rump, sending it galloping out of the barn. Harrison mounted his own horse and followed. Behind him, he could hear the attackers giving chase, but in the darkness and confusion, they had the advantage. He caught up with Citlali and they rode hard, not slowing until the sounds of pursuit had long since faded. They stopped to rest when dawn broke, hiding in a small canyon. Harrison examined his shoulder and found that the bullet had only grazed him, though it hurt like hell. Henry had finally stopped crying, exhausted, sleeping in his mother's arms. "I am sorry," Citlali said, her voice breaking. "I am so sorry, Harrison. You have lost everything because of me." Harrison reached across the small distance between them and cupped her face. "I have lost nothing that matters. You and Henry are safe. That is all I care about. Buildings can be replaced. Land can be replaced. But you are irreplaceable." They made their way to Santa Fe, arriving 3 days later, exhausted and traumatized. Father Miguel took them in without hesitation, offering them shelter in the small quarters behind the mission church. He sent word to Golden and learned that the attack was being investigated, but that no arrests had been made. The general sentiment, the priest reported sadly, was that Harrison had brought trouble on himself by marrying an Apache woman. "You are not safe in New Mexico," Father Miguel said. "Not anymore. The tensions here are too high. You need to go somewhere else." "We had already decided to leave," Harrison told him, "to go to California, but now I have nothing. The ranch was all I had." Father Miguel was quiet for a moment, then said, "I may be able to help. The church has connections, and I know of a family in San Diego who is looking for someone to manage their ranch. They are good people, forward-thinking. I believe they would accept your situation." It took several weeks to make the arrangements, weeks during which Harrison and Citlali lived in the mission, helping Father Miguel with his work among the poor and displaced. Harrison found healing in the physical labor, and Citlali found solace in helping care for the children who came to the mission. Finally, the arrangements were complete. The family in San Diego, a wealthy couple named the Harringtons, had agreed to hire Harrison's site unseen based on Father Miguel's recommendation. They would provide a house and a salary, and Harrison would manage their substantial cattle operation. The journey to California was long and arduous. They traveled by wagon with a group of traders heading west, strength and safety in numbers. Little Henry handled the trip better than Harrison expected, adapting to life on the road with the resilience of the very young. San Diego was unlike anywhere Harrison had ever been. The town was bigger and more cosmopolitan than anything he had known in New Mexico, with people from many different backgrounds living side by side. The air smelled of salt from the nearby ocean, a scent that was strange but not unpleasant. The Harrington Ranch sprawled across hundreds of acres of rolling hills overlooking the sea. Mr. and Mrs. Harrington were in their 50s, a dignified couple who greeted Harrison and Citlali with courtesy and without apparent prejudice. "Father Miguel speaks very highly of you," Mr. Harrington said as he showed them around the property. "He says you are honest, hardworking, and no cattle. That is good enough for me. And Mrs. Hayes," he turned to Citlali, "welcome. I hope you and your son will be happy here." The house they were given was small but comfortable, with 2 bedrooms and a view of the hills. That first night in their new home, Harrison held Citlali close as they stood at the window, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. "This feels like a dream," Citlali whispered. "After everything that happened, I did not think we would find peace." "We have been through fire," Harrison said. "Literally, but we came through together. That is what matters. The years that followed were good ones." Harrison proved himself invaluable to the Harringtons, and the ranch prospered under his management. He and Citlali made friends among the other ranch workers and in the town, and while they still faced occasional prejudice, it was nothing like what they had experienced in New Mexico. San Diego was simply more accustomed to diversity. Henry grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved horses as much as his mother did. By the time he was 5, he could ride better than most adults. He was a bridge between worlds in the best possible way, comfortable in both his father's culture and his mother's. Citlali made sure he knew the stories and traditions of her people, while Harrison taught him to read and write and figure numbers. When Henry was 6, Citlali gave birth to twin girls. They named them Clara and Caroline, and their arrival filled the house with chaos and joy. Harrison would often come home from a long day working on the ranch to find Citlali surrounded by all 3 children, and the sight never failed to make his heart swell with love. The Harringtons, having no children of their own, doted on Harrison and Citlali's family. Mrs. Harrington particularly took to the children, often inviting them up to the main house for tea and cookies. As the years passed, the relationship between the 2 families deepened into genuine affection and respect. When Henry turned 12, Mr. Harrington offered to pay for him to attend school in San Diego proper. It was a generous offer, and after much discussion, Harrison and Citlali accepted. Henry was smart and deserved the opportunities that education could provide. The twins, now 6 years old, also started attending the small schoolhouse near the ranch. Life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Harrison was now in his mid-30s, and Citlali was 29. They had been together for over a decade, and their love had only deepened with time. The passion of their early days had matured into something richer and more complex, a partnership built on shared trials and triumphs. One evening, as they sat on the porch of their house watching the sunset, Citlali leaned her head on Harrison's shoulder and said, "You ever think about that day? The day you found me in the snow?" "I think about it often," Harrison admitted. "I think about how different my life would be if I had ridden past, if I had not heard you whisper those 2 words. 'Warm me,'" Citlali murmured. "I was so cold I thought I was dying. And then you were there, like an angel. I remember looking into your eyes and thinking that if I died, at least the last thing I saw would be kindness." Harrison turned to her, touching her face gently. "That was the day my real life began. Everything before that feels like I was just going through the motions, waiting for something without knowing what I was waiting for. And then there you were." "Here we are," Citlali corrected with a smile. "Still together, still in love, with 3 beautiful children and a good life." "We did it, Harrison. Despite everything that tried to keep us apart, we built this." "We did," Harrison agreed, pulling her closer. "And I would do it all again. Every hardship, every challenge, every moment of fear, it was all worth it to end up here with you." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of purple and indigo. From inside the house, they could hear the sounds of their children getting ready for bed. Clara and Caroline arguing about something in that way that only sisters can, and Henry's deeper voice telling them to settle down. When Harrison was 40, Mr. Harrington called him into his study for a private conversation. The old rancher, now in his 60s and in declining health, had a proposition. He wanted to sell the ranch, but rather than sell to a stranger, he wanted to offer Harrison the opportunity to buy it. He would carry the note at a fair interest rate, with payments Harrison could afford from the ranch's profits. Harrison was stunned. To own such a prosperous ranch was beyond anything he had ever dreamed. That evening he discussed it with Citlali, laying out the opportunity and the risks. "Can we afford it?" Citlali asked practically. "I think so. It will be tight, but Mr. Harrington is being more than fair with the terms. And this ranch, Citlali, it is one of the best in the area. If we own it, we can pass it down to Henry and the girls. We can build something lasting." Citlali smiled. "Then I think we should do it. You have worked hard all your life, Harrison. You deserve this." The transaction took several months to finalize, but by the time Harrison turned 41, He and Citlali were the owners of the Harrington Ranch, which they renamed the Morning Star Ranch after Citlali's name. It was a new beginning, a culmination of everything they had worked toward. The Harringtons moved to San Diego to live with Mrs. Harrington's sister, but they remained close friends, visiting often. Mr. Harrington lived long enough to see Harrison make a success of ownership, passing away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 68. Mrs. Harrington followed 2 years later, and in her will, she left a generous sum of money to be divided among Henry, Clara, and Caroline, whom she had come to love as if they were her own grandchildren. Henry grew into a fine young man, graduating from school with honors and deciding to study law. Harrison and Citlali were immensely proud, seeing their son become a man who would fight for justice with his mind rather than with a gun. Clara and Caroline, now teenagers, were both skilled riders and helped run the ranch alongside their parents. When Harrison was 45 and Citlali was 38, they received unexpected news. Citlali was pregnant again. At her age, it was risky, and Harrison worried constantly. But Citlali took the pregnancy in stride, as she did most things, and 7 months later gave birth to a healthy baby girl they named Catherine. Catherine was a joy, a surprise blessing that brought new energy into their lives. Henry, now 20 and studying law in Los Angeles, came home often to see his baby sister. The twins, now 15, doted on her endlessly. As Harrison approached 50, he sometimes had moments of reflection, looking back on the long, winding path his life had taken. From a lonely cowboy living by himself in the New Mexico territory, to a ranch owner with a wife he loved beyond measure and 4 children who were the pride of his life. The journey had been remarkable. One winter evening, almost exactly 20 years after he had found Citlali in that snowdrift, they sat together by the fire. Catherine, now 5 years old, was asleep in Citlali's arms. Harrison looked at his wife, seeing the gray now threading through her dark hair, the lines that life and laughter had etched around her eyes, and thought she had never been more beautiful. "What are you thinking?" Citlali asked, catching him staring. "I am thinking about how lucky I am," Harrison said honestly. 20 years ago, I found you frozen in the snow. You asked me to warm you, and I did. But Citlali, you warmed me too. You took my cold, lonely life and filled it with love and purpose and joy. You changed my winter into spring." Citlali's eyes shimmered with tears. "You gave me life, Harrison, not just that day when you saved me from freezing, but every day since. You gave me love when I thought I would never find it. You gave me a home when I was lost. You gave me children and a future. Everything good in my life comes from you." "No," Harrison said softly. "Everything good in our life comes from us. From the choice we made to love each other despite the odds. From our decision to stand together no matter what the world threw at us." He leaned over and kissed her gently, careful not to wake Catherine. "I love you, Citlali Hayes. I have loved you from the moment you opened your eyes and looked at me in that snowdrift, and I will love you until my last breath." "And I love you," Citlali whispered back. "My heart, my home, my everything." The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own challenges and joys. Henry became a successful lawyer in Los Angeles, using his unique perspective as the son of a white father and Apache mother to fight for justice for people of all backgrounds. He married a kind woman named Sarah when he was 25, and they gave Harrison and Citlali their first grandchild, a boy they named Samuel. The twins took different paths. Clara, ever the adventurer, moved to San Francisco and opened a business importing goods from the Orient. Caroline stayed on the ranch, marrying the son of a neighboring rancher and building a house on the property. She and her husband worked the land alongside Harrison and Citlali, and Caroline gave birth to 3 children in quick succession. Catherine, the baby of the family, showed signs of being the smartest of all of them. She loved books and learning, and Harrison and Citlali knew she would do something remarkable with her life. As Harrison entered his 60s, he began to slow down, letting Caroline and her husband take on more of the day-to-day running of the ranch. He and Citlali spent more time simply enjoying life, taking long walks in the evening, playing with their grandchildren, and sitting together on the porch watching the sun set over the hills. "We did well," Citlali said one evening as they sat together, her hand in his. She was 55 now, her hair more gray than black, but to Harrison, she was still the most beautiful woman in the world. "We did better than well," Harrison replied, squeezing her hand. "We built something that will last. Our children and grandchildren will carry on what we started." "Do you have any regrets?" Citlali asked. Harrison thought about it carefully. "None," he said finally. "There were hard times and scary times and times when I did not know if we would make it through, but I would not change any of it. Every challenge made us stronger. Every hardship brought us closer together. No, I have no regrets." Citlali smiled, that radiant smile that still had the power to make his heart skip a beat. "Good, neither do I." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red. From inside the house, they could hear the sounds of their family, Caroline calling her children for supper, the laughter of grandchildren playing. Harrison thought back to that February day so many years ago when he had found Citlali half frozen in the snow. He thought about the words she had whispered, "Warm me," and how those 2 simple words had changed the course of both their lives. He had warmed her that day, saving her life. But in every way that truly mattered, she had saved his. She had taken a man who was simply existing and taught him how to truly live. She had shown him what it meant to love and be loved, to build something meaningful, to create a legacy. As the sun set on another day, Harrison pulled Citlali close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair, feeling the solid warmth of her body against his. They had faced down blizzards and fire, prejudice and violence, loss and fear. But through it all they had held onto each other, and that had made all the difference. "I love you," he whispered into her hair, "and I love you," she whispered back. "Always and forever." They sat together as darkness fell. 2 souls who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life and a love that would echo through generations. The stars began to appear overhead, one by one, brilliant pinpoints of light in the vast darkness. Harrison thought about Citlali's name, how it meant star, and how appropriate that was. She had been his guiding light, leading him home. The seasons turned, as they always do. Harrison made it to his 70th birthday, surrounded by his children, grandchildren, and even 2 great-grandchildren. Citlali, at 63, was still by his side, still the center of his world. Henry had become a respected judge. Clara's import business had made her wealthy, and she used that wealth to support causes that helped immigrant families. Caroline and her husband had expanded the Morning Star Ranch, making it one of the most successful operations in Southern California. And Catherine, the baby who had been a surprise blessing, had become a teacher, educating the children of ranch workers and townspeople alike without discrimination. One spring evening, Harrison and Citlali sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. Harrison was feeling his age now, his joints stiff, his movements slow. But his mind was still sharp, and his love for Citlali had not dimmed one bit. "Do you remember the first words I ever spoke to you?" Citlali asked suddenly. Harrison smiled. "How could I forget? You said, 'Warm me.'" And you did. You warmed me then, and you have kept me warm every day since. Even now, in the autumn of our lives, I feel the warmth of your love." "You make it sound like our story is ending," Harrison said, trying to keep his tone light. Citlali turned to look at him, her dark eyes still bright despite the passage of years. "All stories end eventually, my love. But ours has been a good story, has it not? A story worth telling." "The best story," Harrison agreed. "A love story for the ages." They sat together as the sun set, talking about their life, remembering moments both big and small. They talked about their children and grandchildren, about the legacy they were leaving behind. They talked about love and loss, joy and sorrow, and everything in between. As the stars began to appear, Citlali leaned her head on Harrison's shoulder, just as she had done thousands of times before. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything, for saving me, for loving me, for giving me this beautiful life." "Thank you," Harrison whispered back, his voice thick with emotion, "for changing my winter into spring, for filling my life with warmth and light." Harrison lived to be 75 years old. When he passed, it was peacefully in his sleep, with Citlali beside him holding his hand. She followed him 3 years later, her heart simply giving out one quiet morning. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together, under the vast California sky. Their children erected a simple stone marker that read, "Harrison Hayes and Citlali Hayes, together in life, together in eternity." He warmed her, and she changed his winter. The Morning Star Ranch continued to prosper under the management of Caroline and her children, and later her grandchildren. Henry's children and grandchildren became lawyers and judges, carrying on his legacy of fighting for justice. Clara's descendants continued her business, expanding it across the Pacific. And Catherine's children became teachers and educators, spreading knowledge and understanding to new generations. The story of Harrison and Citlali became a family legend, passed down through the generations. It was a story about love conquering hate, about two people from different worlds who chose each other and built something beautiful despite every obstacle in their path. It was a story about courage and commitment, about holding on when it would have been easier to let go. On winter evenings, when snow fell on the hills of the Morning Star Ranch, descendants of Harrison and Citlali would gather around fires and tell the story of how it all began. They would speak of a cowboy who found a frozen Apache woman in a snowdrift, of two words whispered in desperate hope, and of the love that bloomed from that moment and changed everything. The great-great-grandchildren would listen with wide eyes, marveling that their family story read like something from a storybook. But it was not fiction. It was real. Harrison and Citlali had lived, had loved, had built a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. Their story proved that love could bridge any divide, overcome any obstacle, survive any storm. It showed that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose love when the world tells you to choose hate. It demonstrated that family is not just about blood, but about the bonds you forge and the life you build together. The Morning Star Ranch stood for generations as a testament to what Harrison and Citlali had created. The land they had worked so hard to maintain flourished, supporting not just their descendants but countless families who worked on the ranch over the years. The values they had instilled in their children, of hard work, fairness, and treating everyone with respect regardless of their background, became the foundation of the ranch's culture. As time marched on into the 20th century and beyond, the world changed dramatically. But on that hill in Southern California, under two simple stones, Harrison and Citlali Hayes rested side by side, their love story complete. They had started with nothing but each other and two words whispered in the snow. They had built a life, a family, and a legacy that would endure for generations. In the end, theirs was a story about the transformative power of love, about choosing to see the humanity in another person when society tells you not to, about the courage it takes to build a life together when the world is against you. It was a story about how one moment of compassion on a frozen February day could change not just one winter, but countless seasons to come. Harrison had given Citlali warmth when she was freezing, and Citlali had given Harrison everything else, everything that truly mattered. Together, they had created something that would outlast them both, a love that would echo through time, inspiring their descendants to be brave, to be kind, and to choose love even when it is the harder path. The story of the cowboy who found a frozen Apache woman in a snowdrift and the life they built together became more than just family history. It became a reminder that love, real love, can overcome anything. That two people who choose each other and commit to standing together can weather any storm. That sometimes the greatest adventures begin with the simplest acts of kindness. And on winter nights when the wind howled and snow fell on the hills of the Morning Star Ranch, some said you could almost feel their presence. Two souls still together, still in love, watching over the family and the land they had created with nothing but love, courage, and an unshakable commitment to each other. Their winter had become an eternal spring, and their love story, which began with a whisper in the snow, would never truly end.